On Labour Lens this week, we will be discussing the world of work in Africa, especially challenges facing workers, employers of labour and government. Also on the show this week, we will examine the issue of unemployment and the need for social security for citizens. Ellen, welcome to Labour Lens. I am Sharon Ijason. Let's take a moment.
The outbreak of the coronavirus is creating a lot of challenges for the global economy. Jobs have been lost, and experts say a lot more will be lost before the end of the year 2020. This will affect teeming youth populations across the world, including Nigerian youths. Nigeria's population consists mainly of youths, accounting for more than 40% between the ages of 0 to 14 years.
Based on our plan, what we intend.
The Youth Compact on COVID-19 want cushions put in place to restore the job space for Nigerian youths, especially after the pandemic.
Post-COVID is more harsh than the COVID itself, because we have so many youths that have lost their jobs. Millions every day are losing jobs. We are collecting data now across the 36 states of mostly youth that are affected by this COVID-19, and in a way try to find a solution. We are targeting 10 million youths.
This is exactly the problem with the youths, especially in Africa or in Nigeria. Let me be specific. Culturally, we have a culture that is biased against the youth in Africa.
Since the outbreak of the pandemic, the unemployment rate across Europe has risen, with airline companies and the automobile sectors making most of the biggest job cuts. The U.S. economy added about 4.8 million jobs last month, but dark clouds loom in spite of that. The University of Chicago estimates that 42% of the recent job cuts will result in permanent job losses. In Nigeria, the National Bureau of Statistics says that the impact of the pandemic on unemployment and income have been widespread. 42% of 1,950 households were no longer working for reasons related to the pandemic.
Passionate supporter.
This business owner says to get this done, the youth need to think ahead and beyond through imbibing technological solutions.
It's a digital age where everything, one of the topics that was treated is how to think like the millennium. We have to start thinking like the millennium. I know none of us are millennium here, but we have to start thinking the way they used to think. And that's the population we want to affect. So we want to be able to understand how do they think, how are they taking COVID-19, how have they been able to receive it.
A United Nations report says that Nigeria is one of the most populous countries in the world, but majority of the young people were the most neglected of this population.
Unions in the aviation industry have accused the Minister of Aviation, Mr. Hadi Sirika, of under-the-table dealings in the concession of 4 international airports. At a press conference held within the premises of the Federal Airports of Nigeria, FAN, the unions, comprising the National Union of Air Transport Employees, Air Transport Services Senior Staff Association of Nigeria, and Association of Nigerian Aviation Professionals, are concerned by how the minister obtained the compliance certificate from Infrastructure Concession Regulatory Commission, ICRC. The Minister of Aviation had recently advertised the document issued him by the ICRC, which confirmed that he complied with all the needed requirements to go ahead with the concessioning of the international airports in Lagos, Abuja, Kano, and Port Harcourt. Speaking on behalf of the aviation unions, the General Secretary of NUATE, Ocheme Abba, said the minister had sidelined the committee set up by the federal government. The unions concluded that they will stage a nationwide protest against the opaque transaction.
President Muhammadu Buhari, the Federal Executive Council, the National Assembly, and the general public not to be deceived by the celebrated certificate of compliance from the ICRC, and not to approve the privately assembled outline business case. This outline, for reasons stated, cannot be detached from individual embedded interests and may be a self-favoring booby trap.
Leaders and affiliates of United Labour Congress of Nigeria (ULC) have returned to Nigeria Labour Congress (NLC). They broke away 5 years ago in the wake of leadership crisis at the NLC Delegates Conference of March 2015. The return of ULC leaders and affiliates to NLC has ended the crisis and division that weakened the capacity of the organized labor to effectively mobilize and challenge perceived anti-labor or anti-masses policies of government since 2015. President of Nigeria Labour Congress at the press conference announced the reconciliation of both parties.
Our bond of brotherhood shall never be broken, celebrating the reconciliation between the Nigerian Labour Congress and the United Labour Congress. The leadership of the Nigerian Labour Congress and United Labour Congress wish to announce to the world that the strain within the rank of organized labor in Nigeria has been resolved. The Nigerian Labour Congress, led by Comrade Ayuba Waba, has fully reconciled with the United Labour Congress, ably led by Comrade Joe Ajiru. Nigerians will recall that after the conduct of the leadership election in the Nigerian Labour Congress at the 10th National Delegate Conference in 2015, some misunderstanding arose between some affiliates of the Congress. Effort by labor veterans, such as pioneer president of the Nigerian Labour Congress, Alhaji Hassan Sumunu, and the former president of the Nigerian Labour Congress, Comrade Adams Aliu Oshimole, to resolve the issue were inconclusive. But we must appreciate their commitment in this direction. Committed to the bond of brotherhood and solidarity, which the labor movement all over the world is known for, the leadership of the Nigerian Labour Congress and the leadership of the United Labour Congress (ULC) kept aglow the light of peaceful resolution towards resolving the misunderstanding as the two leadership resorted to direct discussion aimed at ending the rift. The outcome of this quiet but sustained effort at making peace is the fruit of the reconciliation that we are celebrating today. It is to the credit of the leadership of the Nigerian Labour Congress and United Labour Congress that the bond of solidarity was never broken, even at the height of misunderstanding. The Nigerian Labour Congress and ULC always cooperated and collaborated in defending Nigerian workers. This was the experience during the negotiation for the new national minimum wage. It is remarkable that in this dark furnace that severely tested our commitment and selfless disposition to our movement's age-long tradition of Nigerian workers first have come to be tested, and to the glory of God, we have tried to win the battle collectively. We have managed to come out as gold, better and brighter. This is the story that overshadows the fleeting pains of the mosquito bite of our misunderstanding in the night. With this reconciliation, the leadership and structure of United Labour Congress have been reintegrated into the Nigerian Labour Congress. In the reconciliation memorandum of understanding between the two leadership, the modus operandi for this reintegration and auxiliary issues are spelled out to the satisfaction of all of us. We commend the leadership of our affiliate union, our state council, and statutory organs up to the National Delegate Conference, whose mandate and support provided the ladder to this milestone reconciliation. We thank our rank and file and the social partners for their counsel, tourism, and support during the dark hours. Fellow workers, comrades, ladies and gentlemen, the Nigerian Labour Congress has emerged out of this crisis stronger. We have gained more affiliates, unions to our movement. We have gained more experience, and we have built more bridges. Going forward from this platform of unity, we are ready now more than ever before to confront and overcome the mirage of challenges facing Nigerian workers economically, socially, and politically. As workers, we believe in unity lies our strength.
Joe Ajero, while corroborating NLC president, said the impact of the unity would become obvious in the days ahead as Labour would embrace dialogue on issues of workers' rights, but would not hesitate to challenge anyone who attempts to marginalize the workforce.
When we are back, you should know that we are stronger. So if we follow it emotionally, we will not be back. But if we use our brain, we have to be back. If we follow it emotionally, we'll be talking of this person did this person did that. But as rational human beings, we should be able to know how it is impacting on the Nigerian workers, either negatively or positively. Based on that, we are here, and events of the next few days will show that we are back. I will not want to go beyond this, but we are back and ready to confront those who want to confront us and play with those who want to play with us.
Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Forward.
With this reconciliation, the leadership and structures of the United Labour Congress have been reintegrated into the Nigeria Labour Congress. In the reconciliation memorandum of understanding signed between the two leadership, the modus operandi for this reintegration and ancillary issues are spelled out to the satisfaction of both parties.
Thank you very much.
The reconciliation is in good direction, and we want to welcome our past leaders for coming together, for calling them together in order to resolve their crisis all this while. So we want to thank our past leaders because they have really taken a similar role in handling the situation. And thank God today they are together. And it's better for the labor so that we make them more stronger to fight or to confront our common enemy, which are the government and the parastatals or the private sectors who are involved in casual workers. You know, but if you are, before they are divided, but now since they are together, I think it's in the good direction.
Well, we are so happy that at the end of the day, all the reconciliation effort has now paid off, and our unions, our brothers that have gone away for some years, they are now back into the labor center, the NLC. And we are so happy because it's going to be more formidable now at the struggle front. They said in unity lies our strength. So for them to come back so that we can become united, definitely there will be more strength that we shall gain through this symbiotic relationship of reconciliation with our estranged union brothers. So we are happy about it. It's a win-win situation for us on all fronts, and we'll be more than ready to combat and battle the common enemy.
Yes, we are very appreciative of that because before we are together, we are all one labor union. So there's something, I know some politics or something enter our union, then this bring this gap between us. So now they are back to NLC. We are very happy to our members back to NLC.
Recently, there was a largest ever online gathering of workers, employers and governments to discuss how to address the economic and social impact of the coronavirus pandemic. This is to ensure that the international body continues to advance social justice and promote decent work. My guest this week is Dennis Zulu, the ILO Director for English-speaking West Africa and Regional Representative to ECOWAS. It's good to have you on the program.
It's good to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for your time. It's a lot of things happening all over the world, especially when it has to do with coronavirus pandemic and how it affects workers. Now, there's this issue of social security, which is not a norm in most English-speaking West African countries. What would be your take as regards government ensuring that they engage the average citizen of their country to ensure that there is this culture of social security?
Well, yes, thank you so much for having me. And indeed, in the last few days, we've been having a global summit which has brought together member states of the ILO, numbering over 189 across the world, to discuss particularly the impact of COVID-19 on the workplace. As you know, the workplace has been severely hit by the consequences of COVID-19, with jobs being lost, with workers who are working in the medical sphere being affected and losing their lives in certain cases. But more broadly, we've seen a loss of income, a loss of working hours, and all the sort of effects that COVID-19 has had. Now, with regard to Social Security, ideally, you will see that in a normal situation, when someone gets employment, they're also supposed to be subscribing to a Social Security insurance scheme. And the scheme really is supposed to provide some relief in a situation where, if a worker loses employment, for instance, or if a worker retires, the scheme now kicks in to ensure that the worker is provided a reasonable amount of money to continue sustaining themselves in a manner or at a level that were sustaining themselves when they were in employment. But also, Social Security schemes are supposed to take care of instances or shocks such as the one we're in right now with COVID-19, where a worker loses his job. So the Social Security scheme would support the worker in the interim until such a time that the worker can get their job back. Now, as you correctly stated, across Africa and in particular West Africa, we do have a deficit in as far as challenges related to the provision of pension schemes or social security schemes for our workers. You see that in a lot of countries in West Africa and English-speaking West Africa, we do have institutions that provide that, but we've seen over the years that despite the existence of such institutions, workers have not really benefited from the contributions that they make to these institutions for a number of reasons. And therefore, the ILO has been working hard to ensure that we support institutions that provide social security to workers, to not only meet the obligations in terms of providing money to workers who've worked a long time, but also ensure that there's transparency and accountability in the way these insurance schemes are governed. So Social Security really is there to provide relief in a situation where a worker suffers a shock. The shock would be that they've now retired, or secondly, that they've lost a job as a result of a pandemic such as the one we're experiencing in the case of COVID-19.
So moving forward, what would be your observation as regards the response towards partnering to ensure that the impacts would probably be minimal compared to what we're experiencing now, especially for workers in Africa?
I think one of the things we need to do better is ensure that, first of all, the capacity of the social security schemes that we have in Africa are enhanced. You might want to know that across the continent, only about 10% of workers are covered by any form of social security. So what we need to do is ensure that these capacities of these institutions are strengthened in not only being able to mobilize the resources, that is the pay-in that workers make during their lifetimes when they're working, but also to ensure that when the time arises for them to pay out, they're able to do that. So in the case of Nigeria, we've partnered many institutions, including NSITF and PENCOM and such, to ensure that they are really on the ball in terms of providing the relief that might be wanted by workers when they leave employment. The other important thing of having social security schemes in place is that it also makes the whole process of data collecting very easy. You'll be interested to note that in the developed world, for instance, it's been quick to ascertain as to how many workers have lost their jobs or how many workers have died, because when workers lose their jobs in the developed world, all they need to do is go and claim their unemployment benefit. And that helps in taking note of those who've lost their jobs. So if you see an increase in the claims for unemployment benefit, that really translates to one job being lost. So it's easy to actually collect data to ascertain the impact of loss of jobs during pandemics such as the one we have. For Africa, it's fairly difficult because then we can only collect data usually when you do labor force surveys. So then that is a very enormous undertaking. So social security schemes are good for a number of reasons. First of all, they provide relief to workers who have lost their jobs in case of pandemics, but also making sure that when these workers leave work after having worked so many years, when they retire, they do not fall into the poverty trap. Basically, what the social security scheme will do is that it will provide incomes to these workers for as long as they live, and in certain situations, even the surviving spouses of workers will be taken care of under the social security scheme. So it's particularly important that we have working institutions in the country to be able to take on this responsibility.
So from your observations, from your learnings, from research that you've participated in before now, is there any law that you think needs to be domesticated for social security to thrive in Africa?
Well, yeah, I mean, as you know, the ILO is a standard-setting agency of the United Nations, and we provide various guidance in terms of various conventions and standards that need to be domesticated. I'm happy that Nigeria is one of those that has been at the forefront of ratifying this convention, specifically those that refer to the universal social protection clause, which basically covers the issues that we're talking about now. So, but I think the challenge is not just about ratification of these international conventions, it's seeing how these conventions are then domesticated into local law, which takes care of social security and other social protection activities. But again, we see that, again, it's not just about domestication, because law is just law and policy is just policy. What we need to ensure is to ensure implementation and the provision of sufficient resources so that the Ministry of Labor and Employment, for instance, can be able to undertake a responsibility as a supervisory organ of government, which supervises some of these social security schemes to ensure that they actually undertake the mandates and providing the relief to workers as they've been obliged to under their respective legislations. So Nigeria is quite on board in as far as ratification, but I think what we need to do more is to ensure that there's implementation and the enforcement of the laws that pertain to the provision of social security for its workers.
So how do you think decent work can be promoted when there is coronavirus pandemic, and we've had lots of protests in Nigeria, across Africa, about lots of layoffs, employers of labor not honoring CBA? What do you think needs to be done to ensure that decent work is being promoted? Like the Director General of ILO would say, that it's a new normal, but it should be a better normal. So what do you think African leaders need to do at this point so we don't have more working poor?
Well, as I said, the meeting we've been having the last few days has been very critical. First of all, in learning what the many African countries have been doing, and also countries across the world have been doing to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on the workplace. But also it's provided an opportunity to share experiences, and I think that's been a very beneficial aspect of the meetings. But you'll be interested to note that the ILO has provided some guidance in terms of some policy prescriptions which could be used to ensure that decent work is protected but also promoted. And as you correctly stated, the ILO is really looking at a better normal now rather than new normal. And these four policy prescriptions are being grouped under what are called 4 pillars. The first pillar really looks at how the governments can stimulate the economies. And one of the ways of doing that is to provide active fiscal policy, basically giving some relief in terms of taxes and things like that, but also increasing government expenditure where there's fiscal space. And I know many countries are debt distressed, so they might not have the extra money to provide the stimulus that the economy needs. But I see that also our partners, the multilateral agencies, have been going out to lend money to countries, including Nigeria, to provide the requisite stimulus needed for the economy. But also, we're also saying that there should be some activities around lending and financial support to specific sectors that need the support at the moment. And I'm glad to note, for instance, there's been discussions in Nigeria about supporting the airline industry, specifically that the airline industry just started operating a few days ago. and so forth. So there's need for that. But also, the second pillar talks about how do we support the individual enterprises themselves, because decent work can only be guaranteed if the individual enterprises are able to retain their workers and also provide the sort of conditions of service that the workers need. And one of the ways of doing this is what we've been talking about since we started. How do we ensure that social security is provided for all the workers that are employed? That's one way of doing it. And secondly, governments and working with enterprises can look at employment retention schemes. And this is where the government comes in to guarantee or provide some support to the enterprise for it to be able to retain its workers through wage subsidies, for instance, and other such things, as well as providing financial tax and other reliefs for enterprises that have been severely affected.
Of course, there is still more that needs to be discussed as regards social security and the impact it would have on the average worker. We'll definitely continue this conversation some other time. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
The need for countries to focus on mitigating the challenges of the early phase of the coronavirus pandemic in the world of work and providing effective responses are essential to having a robust economy after COVID-19. That's the much we can take on this week's edition of Labor Lens. Join us next week as we continue to discuss the impact of coronavirus pandemic on the world of work and other labor matters. I am Sharon Ijason. Always remember that labor creates wealth.